Hi, I'm Mark Brown II, and I will be talking to you today about intersectional what? Redux Who, musings on feminism and web development. Yay! Let's get excited! Okay, so first I want to start with an acknowledgement of country. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I would like to pay respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. So this happened because you read my bio, but I'll go over really quickly. I'm a front-end developer at AKQA, which is a design firm here in Melbourne. Prior to that, I worked at Y&R Melbourne, the US Federal Department of Commerce, the Aspen Institute as well. Outside of being a developer, I am a clear worshiper of all things Bay. Hello. And I do drag under the name Nefirtiti LaNegra. That is me in a blonde wig, living my Marilyn Monroe realness life, okay? So, disclaimer about this talk. These are my thoughts and my musings. I am not the single source of truth. So again, we are allowed to disagree. You're allowed to have a different opinion, and I love that. So let me just make that very clear. And I also want to be very clear that a lot of the context in which I'm speaking is going to be about the US, because clearly, in case you can't tell through my accent, I am from the US. So, the agenda for today. I want to go over a few terminology. We want to talk about intersectionality and unit testing. Think about your work and the system, talk about different schools of thought, and lastly, end on an idea about community. So first, terminology, feminism. Feminism, as I'm using it in my talk today, is advocacy for women's rights on the grounds of equality of the sexes. Intersectionality is the interconnected nature of social categorizations. Social categorizations includes things like race, gender, sexuality, ableism, all these sorts of things that make up our unique identities. And web development is developing websites for the internet, which I pray if you are here, you knew what the hell that meant. Like, if I actually explain that, we have a larger conversation to have. So, first of all, one could wonder, how does intersectionality work? So first, we're going to start by thinking about the different systems of oppression that exist. Those include things like the patriarchy, right, which is creating a system that benefits men over others. Things like racism and white supremacy, systems that decide that white people are worth more or that their opinions are more valuable than anybody who is non-white. Things like class, so people in higher classes have more value than those who are lower class. And I have a lovely little graphic here which goes through a lot of them, right? So there's a dominant group / ideology, right? Thinking about gender, men is the dominant group. And then if you're not a male or woman or anyone who's not male, you're outside of that. You know, moves on through sexuality, appearance, language, things like that. So if we think about the identity of a black woman, right? This individual identifies as black, which means they possibly are living under systems of oppression regarding racism and also possibly anti-blackness. And if this person identifies as the woman, you can imagine that they're probably dealing with issues regarding the patriarchy and sexism. So you then wonder, like, how in the world does intersectionality even relate to like unit testing whatsoever? And I would say, one, let's think about unit testing and how we write code, right? Unit testing is about testing individual units of behavior, right? Small function that we write. We want to make sure that we write the code correctly, that it gives us back the response that we want. And typically you write these tests before you write code if you're doing test-driven development. And in particular, also at unit testing, it points out your assumptions. So, for example, if I write a function that says I take in two values, I want to add them together, I want you to return that value to me, one of the assumptions I'm making, the one that I'm going to be given two values that are numbers, right? If I give it an object in a string, it's not going to act correctly, right? I'm assuming that it's going to return a number to me, right? So if it adds, if I put those two values in and somehow that comes back to me as a string, for example, and I didn't mean for that, you recognize I made assumptions and maybe I need to fix something about the function that I've written. So then we ask ourselves, can I use unit testing ideology to check my actions, right? So this is a framework in which I think about this, right? So you have the action that you want to perform. You have the intention, which is your functionality, right? So as I mentioned in my previous thing, with function, if I give it two values, I want them to add together. I want you to get them back to me what the combination is. Think about what you are testing. And then the intersection of that is if you, with your actions, you think about what are the systems of oppression that are at play. And of course, with any unit test, you want to know whether you pass or whether you fail. So first action, asking a black woman if she likes Beyonce. So your intention, of course, is to potentially make this person feel welcome, feel a part of the team, or gently start a conversation. And the thing that we're testing today is, are you contributing to the oppression of this person? Are you possibly being offensive? So when you think about those two things, you move on to thinking, what are the systems of oppression that are potentially at play? Again, we just went over what it means to be a Black woman. So that means she's possibly dealing with racism, again, with the patriarchy. And then we're going to figure out whether your action passes or fails your specific unit test. So these are the questions you could possibly ask yourself, given your systems of oppression. Is your action racist? Is your action sexist? And also, what are the assumptions you are making? So, do you think it's racist? Yes, no, maybe. Yes, no, great. Do you think it is sexist? And think about what are the assumptions you are making in asking this question. So for me, I was like, is it racist? Nah. I'm like, most Black women love Beyonce. I'm gonna just say that. Is your action sexist, right? So think about it, is your action racist? Are you proactively saying, are you in any means oppressing her by making her feel that she is less than because she is Black when you are asking this question? I don't think so. Are you by any means thinking that, are you simply oppressing her by saying because you are a woman, that you are in any means less than me by asking this question? I don't think so. But what are the assumptions that you're making, including me at this moment? You're assuming, one, that Black women like Beyonce, and that two, Beyonce is a good artist. And these assumptions are important because these are the moments when you start to not think about the assumptions you're making. I think that is when we start to have problems, right? If I ask a Black woman if she likes Beyonce, she could easily rebut me and say, well, that's rude. Just because I'm a Black woman doesn't mean I like Beyonce. And it would be very easy for me to become defensive and be like, no, that's not what I meant, and no, that's not what I'm trying to say. That's not true. If I've thought about this unit test and thought about the assumptions that I'm making, I can own the fact that, yeah, I made that assumption. I assumed because you are a Black woman, you would like Beyonce. So you have every right to then say to me, you made that assumption, and I could say, yes, I apologize, did not mean to be offensive. That is something that I assumed, and I appreciate your feedback, right? So being conscious of the assumptions you're making when you have these actions can start and spark a dialogue, right? Rather than people potentially being defensive. So in my mind, you passed. Yay! Another one, asking a queer Latinx trans person if they like RuPaul's Drag Race. Again, your intention is trying to build a connection with this person. You're testing, are you contributing to the oppression of them? And if you look at all their individual identities, so they're queer, so they're potentially dealing with issues of heterosexism, Latinx, which means racism. They're trans, which means they could be dealing with a mix of heterosexism and transphobia. And also the sexism because they're, quite frankly, they're possibly not a man, depending on how they identify. So again, we're gonna ask if this action passes or fails your specific unit test. So again, you ask yourselves these questions. Look at them, give yourself 5 seconds, think about it. Is it racist, sexist, heterosexist, transphobic? What are the assumptions? And in my mind, again, is it racist? I don't think so. Sexist? No. Heterosexist? No. Transphobic? No. But again, I'm making the assumption that people who identify as LGBTQIA and others within that community like RuPaul. So in my mind, you passed. Except if you potentially ask a trans person in today's society about this, they could get a little upset because RuPaul has gotten into trouble recently with his comments regarding having trans people on his show. So all of a sudden, what you thought was something that was like you were trying to be accepting, trying to really bring them into a conversation, can potentially be transphobic, right? You bring up trauma for them because they were offended by RuPaul. Again, just recognizing that, you can then start a conversation even if, in my mind, you did fail this unit test. Again, so another action, something a little bit, asking the only woman on the development team if she can take notes. Ooh, you laugh because you already know, huh? Yeah. I'm like, this one, hey. Again, so your intention is just like to find someone to take the notes, right? So you're testing if you're contributing to the oppression of this person. And again, I only mentioned that this individual is a woman, so you can assume that the oppression at play potentially is sexism, and you ask if you're passing or failing your unit test. Take a second, do you think this is sexist? And what are the assumptions that you're making? Right, okay, everyone. Yeah, alrighty, love this, right? So your actions can be seen as sexist. Why? Because you're assuming that a woman should be willing to take notes. right? As if that's her job. And that the person taking notes can pay attention, right? So not only is it about the sort of historical part of women being the role of like administrative assistants, executive assistants, secretaries, it's also about at that moment, if you're taking, or if you are me possibly taking notes in a meeting, there's no way I can really engage in a conversation if I'm also taking notes. So what you're then doing is sort of signaling to her that potentially her voice in that meeting isn't as necessary or doesn't have as much value as the other men in the room. So, fail. And in terms that I want to think about this, so again with that one, someone can say, well, that's not my intention, that's not what I wanted to do. And in that sort of moment, I want to think about these two terms, which is unconscious bias and conscious bias, right? So unconscious bias are the stereotypes we have about people, that we form about individuals that are outside of our own conscious awareness, versus conscious bias is within our conscious awareness. So conscious is saying like, Black people do X thing, women like X, men do X, these large sweeping generalizations, right? Unconscious bias is when I say the word beauty, what do you think of? When I say criminal, what do you think of, right? Secretary, what do you think of? These sorts of words, which are just what we think of as words, are filled with ideas that you already have about them that you may not be always conscious that you have. So being a part of that, so when you think about the previous example, right, you're like, I just asked a person on my team, but could you have a moment and think about your unconscious bias and say, yeah, but what could that possibly be coming from? Can I check myself in this moment? So, touching a woman of color or coworker's hair without her permission. All right. Again, your intention is just simply to feel the texture of their hair, right? It's nice, it's lovely. Look at this, look at this. This is hair goals, okay? And then you're testing if you're contributing to their oppression. And again, because of women of color, we're thinking about sexism and racism. So again, thinking about this test, is it racist? Is it sexist? And what are the assumptions that you're making? And then, I think, is it racist? Yes. And do I think that the action is sexist? Yes. And what are the potential assumptions that you're making? One, that she doesn't mind you touching her body without her permission, right? Two, that she possibly wants to engage in a conversation about her hair or hairstyle. And three, that she wants to take the time to educate you on her hairstyle, right? These are all assumptions that potentially can be made and can be thought about if you do this unit test before you actually perform your action. So, again, failed. But the other part of this lovely unit test is the ability to check your privilege, right? We've been talking a lot about this, about actions that you do to other people. But the beauty of this unit testing sort of framework can also say, what is your space within society, right? So this action, the way you can use this unit test is identifying your privileges, right? Your intention is to be more conscious of your space within society. What are your benefits? And the thing that can be returned to you are the privileges that you have. So the test can include questions like, are you white? Do you identify as male? Are you heterosexual, college educated, someone who identifies with a disability or not, right? All the sort of systems of oppression we dealt with earlier. And you simply put that through your unit test and returns your privileges to you so you can be more conscious of that. And why does that matter? Why does that unit test have any sort of influence? One, it makes you realize why different people put in the same situation can have different outcomes, right? It helps you distinguish your privileges to foster conversations, right? And it starts an internal conversation with yourself about how you can potentially leverage your privilege to help others and be an ally, right? I'm someone who identifies as male, but I'm constantly aware of that and constantly trying to use that to amplify the others of those who do not identify as male, right? That is why I stand as a feminist on purpose. And it's also for you to recognize that oppression is a matrix and not a hierarchy, right? It can be very easy to say like, I'm Black, queer, and so my life is harder than like, you know, a Latino man who just is straight. And that's really limiting the sort of conversation around oppression, right? We can talk about our privileges and oppression, but you have to understand that my matrix is not your matrix, and our oppressions may be different, and that I should not say that I am more oppressed because I happen to live I have identifiers that are potentially more discriminated against than yours. So where does all this work? You know, where does this work in the system? We've all been developers, potentially front end, I'm moving here. We've all been asked, you know, you're on a large project and someone comes to you and they're like, hey, we need you to build this button. And you're like, Lord, I went through school, I did CS, you know, I went to General Assembly, you know, I learned all these things for you to tell me to build a button. Right? Like, what? Like, why does this button even matter? Like, why do I even have to worry about this, right? In the same way, people, I've sometimes heard, does being mindful of people's gender pronouns actually matter? right? Like, oh, like if I see you, if I think like you're a woman, I can call you she. If I think you're a guy, he. And like, oh, someone wants me to call them she. Like, that's so much work. Like, why does it even matter, right? Does my work have any impact on the larger system, right? Does my button matter on this website? Does my recognition of an individual's gender matter in the larger terms of patriarchy and like sexism and gender identity? Like, it's one person, it's one conversation. And I would argue that this comes back to what we think of within web development of the user experience. Right? We always think about user experience to some degree as individuals sitting down on our sites and saying, this is what I want you to do, and figuring a way for them to proactively be successful in their track, right? In the sort of tasks that we have assigned to them. And then we figure out if they are successful at it, then we can assume that other people who are similar to them can also be successful at this task. And once that group is then able to do it, we can then broaden our reach and get a larger community. And that's something that we believe in web development. And I think the same thing applies here in these sorts of conversations, right? In web development, your button can be used as registration, for checkout, for login. It truly is a gateway for some people in this site. In the same way that gender pronouns are used in greeting people, in correspondence over email, over telling narratives about this potential person. And that sort of fosters an inclusive and respectful atmosphere that is beneficial for everyone. So again, your button matters in the same way that your actions also matter. So moving on, thinking about the different schools of thought on this, in web development, it's always about trying to build and sort of foster new technology and solve problems, like building new components, making things faster and improving. And there are multiple approaches to the same problem, right? That's why we have React versus Angular versus Vue. That's why in JavaScript we have functional programming versus object-oriented versus procedural. And the same way that feminism works to solve its problems as well, right? Inequitable pay for women, right? Media representations of women, access to healthcare. And so inside of the umbrella of feminism, you have to recognize that there are multiple schools of thought, right? There's cultural feminism, radical feminism, postmodern feminism, postcolonial feminism, right? So there's no one way to be a feminist in the same way that there's not one way to be a developer, right? That we all, to some degree, do a little bit of blending, right? And that's okay. So again, web development is a community in the same way that feminism is a community. And that means, one, we're going to make mistakes, right? I recognize that there are times people are going to check me on the things that I do and the things that I say, even with good intentions. And I appreciate those who challenge me on the things that I say and the things that I believe as well. In the same way that we do in web development, right? We've all gotten a peer review where someone has been like, that function works, but like that for loop is busted. Like, I know we can do it a little bit better than this. Like, I just want you to try like a little bit harder, right? And it's not to be mean, it's not to tear you down, it's not to say that you're unintelligent, it's simply to say, I think you can do a little bit better. I want to challenge you to move this code a little bit further. And with that, you're then now growing together, right? You now have a new tool to do, you now know what for each is. But, so we all get better, we all build a better community. And that ignorance can be offensive, but it doesn't have to be intentional, right? Again, when I get checked on things that I have done, my ignorance isn't that I'm purposely trying to be hurtful to someone in this experience. But that doesn't mean it's meant to be offensive. That just simply means that it wasn't intentional. So that is my talk. Oh my God. Thanks, guys and ladies. And those of all sorts of gender backgrounds.